Well, Brett, good to see you, man. Glad to have you with us. Why don't you go ahead and take a minute and introduce yourself and talk about the journey, man? You guys have been at it for a while and made a heck of a lot of progress. Why don't you give a little intro?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, man, it's great to see you, Tanner. You too, David. Man, it's been. I was thinking the other day, it's been about 5 years since I first met you guys, and time flies. That's all I can say. And especially when you're taking on a new project like we did, we started this endeavor, this path that we're on. We started, really in late 2021 was kind of the official kickoff. So I'm kind of telling everybody right now, I've been at it for 2.5 years, pretty solid at this point. And a lot of people
This
think
this is great, you guys. For everybody to know what happened, they I don't know if you started that bank or bought that bank, but started Victory Bank.
yeah, that's correct. So we had the classic choice of, do we de novo or do we buy a bank and try to build on it? And as you both know, I mean, there's at least two variations of each one of those forks in the road that you can pick. One is you go de novo, you build everything out the way you want with exactly the partners that you want to do it with from the beginning, but you're starting with deposit account number one and loan number one and employee number one and on down the line.
Right.
And also, as you know, you're gonna look at incurring some, fairly deep operating losses over probably a 3-year period before you turn the corner. Now, there's
And they make it tough too on the capital requirements and what kind of lending and things that you can do. It's like it's so much smarter to buy a bank and create what you want than when you said that, 20, I was thinking, hell man, you'd still be another 2 years out if you were trying to do a de novo, right?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So, I wanted to de novo. I was committed to that, and probably some of those early conversations I had with both of you, and we could get really excited about that. And again, there's some really good success stories in the making right now on de novos. I'm aware of a few, and certainly in the corner of pulling for those folks and helping them however I can. But yeah, it came down to a real candid conversation with my you talk about your Yoda or your advisor, who do you really listen to when you have that one moment where you've got to sink or swim? And in my moment, we said, hey, let's go buy a bank. And
Yep.
and it made total sense. It was, for us, it was clear. The advantages to that, obviously, if you find the right partner, and that's how you have to look at it when you're purchasing a bank, is who are we dealing with? And maybe as importantly, what do they think of us? Like, how are they going to deal with us going forward? Because it's entering a partnership at that point. So
Right.
we
Because you're not starting them with employee one,
exactly. So we only, we ended up with not only uh, some really good employees, a really good deposit base to start out with, in some good markets. I mean, at the beginning, you don't know what you're getting into, and that's not your home base. But uh, this one ended up fitting, a lot better than I would have ever imagined from the very get go. Is sitting here right now today. But most importantly, it was the culture of that organization and the leader who had spent a lot of years of his life taking care of the community and taking care of the folks in the bank, and really doing a good job with all the other plates that have to spin to run a bank. One of the things that was really surprising to me, coming from a larger bank setting, I've been from Wells Fargo early in my career to a $1 billion bank that really had a lot of momentum, and we were doing a lot of things right and had gone through a lot of the succession uh, pieces and technology implementation, and thinking during those times that, hey, it can't be that hard to run $100 million bank. It's, how hard could it be? That's smaller than a lot of people's loan portfolios when you're in that kind of a world. And what you realize is, like, not only is it harder, it's harder because of the resources and the lack of time. I
Yeah.
mean, you have a million things tugging at you in your day, and I just don't know. I mean, props to all the 100 million and $200 million bank operators that they're that size and want to be that size for a reason, because man, that takes a lot of talent to do that, and I'm
You are
still
so
learning.
right. I agree completely. I tell people, I'm pretty damn sure Ronnie Miller could probably run Chase, and I doubt that Jamie Dimon could make it down here trying to do this, it's tougher. It's a lot tougher when you don't have the resources and all the things that you have at a big bank, right? And the big four, I mean, you talk about when you're too big to fail, it's almost you're too big to fail. So it makes a big difference in what your capabilities are.
Well said. Let's talk a little bit, guys. So fun topic, right? That we'll all get. Banking, ranching, and technology. How the hell did we all get here, right? And so I think from our family, man, we showed up in Texas in 1834. The ranch is officially 1850 and been in the family ever since. So it's the third oldest running ranch that's been continuously run by one family. What I think is funny, man, it's after all the years of traveling all over, especially in the South around banking, it's not unusual at all that you got farmers and ranchers and bankers all kind of mixed and blended together. Talk a little bit about that, man. I know you got a lot of experience there too.
Yeah, that's an awesome statement. So yeah, I've realized that over my career, and I can't say that I was ever, uh, really that aware of the history of banking and ranching and oil and gas kind of intertwined in there for a lot of these legacy kind of situations as well. And yeah, there's been such a huge amount of success. I mean, J.P. Morgan Chase, I believe, has a history that starts with ranching and oil and gas, um,
Yep.
an iteration there, and it's just
Me and him used to
interesting
hang
to
around
see.
together. I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. It's really interesting. They're both of those industries are difficult, of course, right? I mean, ranching for a whole basket of reasons, weather uncertainty with commodities. I mean, you're dealing with animals that can fall over and you're dead at any point in time, and you're wiped out. There's no assurances there. Banking is a little bit. I think there are a few more assurances because of the regulatory framework. I think partially, but also, there's a lot of risk and creativity involved in doing so, and entrepreneurialism involved with it, and I think there's some really cool old stories and real similar to both of you and my family. Like a lot of stories in this part of the world, they came from the South and they ended up in a place where they thought that they could do really well actually farming and realized that where they were was a little too high and a little too cold to be viable in that way. And then just one thing led to another. One of my great granddads was a real entrepreneur and hustled really hard through the depression, and they just kind of scratched it out until about that point and put together a decent ranch at that point. And so that still lives on today. It's pretty neat.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Well, look, can we talk a little bit? So, certainly want to hear about kind of the journey that you went on. I mean, thinking about everything that you go through, right? Buying a bank and all the parts and pieces. I mean, obviously capital, right? Partners like you talked about. And then the technology side, right? You don't want to be the guy that comes in and changes everything. We've all had that boss, and you don't want to be that guy. At the same time, you've got your own agenda and things that you do want to change or direction you want to go. So can you talk about just what that looked like and balancing all that? I mean, it's some pretty unique problems that you've had to face, I'm sure.
Yeah, so that starts with people as well, right? So we've had some we've had some interesting experiences in our prior lives, and I say we because I've got at least three or four people that I've worked with, on and off throughout the years for a lot of years combined, and what we promised ourselves when we started this journey was we're just going to try not to mess this up from the early stage. Like let's just don't do anything big and dumb and mess this up. And obviously, let's treat people right and let's be understanding. Let's be patient. And the first thing that we told the group when we gathered the acquired bank together and got to meet everybody. Of course, we'd had successive meetings with different folks in different departments up to that point. But the first thing we said was, look, we don't know what to do. We're going to tell you that up front. We don't have all the answers. We're not going to try to tell you that we're the experts or we have this great, snappy program to acquire banks. We don't. But we're real sure we know what not to do. And we're just going to not do that. And that's really how it started. And that's still paying dividends today. I mean, we've got just pretty much 100% of the staff that we started with, although it was, it was small. We had 16, 17 people. The prior CEO and family legacy owner of the bank still has a spot with us. And, like I said earlier, he's like a partner to me. He's a mentor, good guy, knows a lot of things that I might have thought I knew and I don't know. And so, anyway, he's taught me a lot about the business, and we just respected that. I'll say that's maybe where we were a little bit different. Might have learned from a different end of that spectrum of just come in and respect everybody and treat them right, and that was a good start for us to start to do some of those other things, Tanner, that you're talking about, where you can start thinking about changing systems and new stuff, and it just takes a little time.
Man, I know we've been talking about, this next move for you for years, and the planning and everything that you put into this deal. And first, let me just say thank you. There's 50 different ways you could have gone here that probably weren't the best for bankers and banking. And you guys did a really thoughtful process and went about this a really good way. And again, trying to protect the community, trying to take care of everybody, and set a situation up that you can still live out your dreams and the vision that you guys want to produce without hurting anybody along the way. That is, hats off to you guys for that. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to know, like, how many push-ups did you have to do? What kind of hurdles did you guys have to go through on the regulatory front to be able to get approval for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the first part of that, we started with really simple core values, and they were really easy for us to define. And those were empathy, believe it or not. That sounds kind of strange to say that in a bank setting, but it's absolutely true. Just taking care of your customers and taking care of your community and people. And then authenticity is huge for me. That's something that we always will focus on and emphasize. And then the third was customer centricity, and just, basically meaning that we're not looking for customer service. We're looking for a great experience for whoever comes in and works with us. On the regulatory side of things, it's certainly a process. And I will say, today, looking back on it, it may be even harder today than it was, a couple of years ago when this process really started for us. We had the advantage of being in the business and, working with our regulators and having, some reputational capital to start with. I know that there's a lot of capable groups and capable capital out there that would like to get into banking. That's one of the things, community banking. That's one of the things that's really, I think, one of the big honors of being able to do this every day is just, it's not something that can just be done. And, going through that process of just, kind of knowing what your plan needs to be, try to keep it as simple as you can, and just clear the successive hurdles. Take it one step at a time. I've talked a lot about this process in those terms, about just take the next step. You don't always know exactly what you're doing, and you don't know that it's always right, but just keep taking a step forward. And that was really how it was with the regulatory process. We just kept going, and then one day we turned to look back and we were through it.
I love it. That you're right though. There was a moment there, a couple of years, where anybody could show up. It's like, hey, we'll get SoFi, we'll give anybody that wants to buy a bank. And then I began to realize that, this may be not a great idea to let just anybody come along and do this. And I think that's a great thing. There's so much, I don't know what negativity might be the right word around the regulators, just all of the regulatory bodies, CFPB all the way to FDIC, and, how they're going about what they do. And there's some things that, like anybody, man, I think we all learn as we go. And this is what makes banking so cool right now. It seems like every year it's cooler than it was the year before. And when people are like, yeah, I can't get my kids interested in it, it's like, what? It's really neat, because of these little changes where, we've got somebody from some fintech or some cool, Apple or whatever wants to start a bank. And at first it was like, sure, okay, if you got the money. Then it was, wait a minute, what are we doing? Because they're creating these tech banks, and that could be a little bit of a regulatory problem. And then they learn more about fintech, and they really crack the whip down on some of the things that were being done incorrectly. And I don't want everybody to really catch on to this too. They're not cracking the whip on people that are doing the right thing. It's so many people were doing the wrong thing. And I think that is all a positive from making sure people like you are the ones that actually purchase a bank, and that people that want to take on these other things, allowing them to do that as long as it's done in a nice compliant way. And all of these fronts that I think the regulators are getting punched in the face over right now are a little misguided. I think actually they were a little late to the game. What do you think?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a sea change, with how the regulatory powers that be view fintech. Certainly, the more BaaS centric kind of banks, and how that was different view on things a few years ago. I too think that the regulatory framework that's being put around, a lot of this is going to be ultimately beneficial and helpful on just creating that structure that you mentioned. That stuff's not going away, as we know, right? That's a big part of, I think what we're talking about today is how do we continue to move those initiatives forward in a safe and compliant way, and still remain relevant. As take AI for example. I mean, it's a frontier, right? I mean, we're talking about ranching and banking and all these things right now. It's like who really knows what that's all about? So if you're going to start, thinking about those kind of things in banking or moving that direction, you've got to really consider, what are we really doing here? Like, what are the real risks? Do we even know what all those risks are? And I think that's where it, might have got off the rails a little bit with different types of fintech and different structures. And I think it's back. It seems like to me. I mean, we're in a good time, I think, where it's the right time to evaluate different technologies and innovations, and really take the time and spend the time to understand how that's going to affect your business and your business model. And I think this is a good time to be checking things out.
Agreed.
And
There's a lot out there.
Tanner, you asked something kind of crazy there a second ago about like branches. I don't know if you were going with like branch automation or what, but you hit on something there, Brett, that got me about, I mean, I always laugh around the fire about the guy that invented the water that comes out of your windshield wipers. And you're like, God, I should have thought of that, right? And all of these little things, when you think back to when you were young and what cars were and what they look like and seat belts and all that kind of stuff, and then you watch the evolution of just the technology in a car, right? And it's pretty cool. And I think we've got a lot of that. And maybe that's where you were headed with that, Tanner, about just the technology sea change in banking. It doesn't mean that we all need to I remember somebody saying, let's make banking fun. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Banking is not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be safe. That's what it's supposed to be. If we don't have that as a fundamental, we lose it all.
This is to your point, man. This is where I probably seem like a crazy person, right? I believe in the legacy side, the family, the small businesses, the small town, right? And some of the things that you mentioned, Brett, grabbed me. I thought respect was a damn good one. Empathy is a good one. And then authenticity, right? But all of those words and the things that we all believe in, and, families in small towns, it's very hands-on relationship, right? And then we bring in technology. And so you see where I feel a little crazy because I'm the biggest proponent on the technology side, but it's where we mesh those together that I think has got to be done well, right? And I've always thought of this as technology shouldn't replace the people or the relationships. It should make both go further, right? And granted, that's a hard thing to come to, but I want to hear your take, Brett, on as you think through the technology landscape and what you're trying to do with balancing those themes, right? How are you thinking about going forward, and what are you looking at specifically?
Yeah, that's so Tanner. I think you encapsulate my thoughts really well with that whole intro right there. It's all about having a strong foundational community bank to begin with, right? I mean, if you look at these really high performers, and there's a lot of different ways to define high performing banks, but generally it's 150 ROA, 15 ROE forever, right? Good credit quality, all the things you want to see in a well run bank. To me, it appears that there are some characteristics that these banks that are able to integrate the exciting part of technology, that the part of that really gets your wheels turning, and mine too, into the bank, that and keep that traditional foundation,
Right.
not just alive, but it helps it thrive when you think like that. So these characteristics of these banks, I mean, it's really interesting. I could name probably 3 or 4 examples right off the top of my head, and I won't throw any names out there, but there are banks that are 2 times better ROA, 20 ROE type range banks they're really low cost deposit gatherers, which means they're obviously very core, and they're big time into taking care of the traditional business niche, or ag, or whatever else they have involved in there, and they're able to integrate one to begin with, one really strong non-interest income source. Like, they find that one thing that they're really good at, or they take on as a serious project, and they become really good at that, and that becomes a big differentiator in their ability to be high performing. And you can use payments for it as an example, or something that you can really integrate a lot of technology into, and there's a lot of knowledge about today, and it kind of fits this regulatory framework a little bit better when you approach it that way. But it's really interesting to look at these banks. I love to study call reports. I'm a call report nerd. I mean, it's like they come out, and it's like Christmas for me, which has got to be something wrong with me. But
Hey, me
I'm just
too. I'm
fascinated.
the same way.
I'm
Well,
fascinated with these
actually,
banks, Dave, that are like, they get it. Like, whatever they're doing, it's very apparent when you look at that call report. It just comes right out
it
to
is.
you
Well,
exactly where they focus, and there are themes there, and you can follow it from bank to bank.
you got it, man. I love to hear you say this. You got me charged up here. That's how I mean, when people, before we had a word for BaaS banking, that's how we figured it out. I mean, looking at call reports, and then, sorting data and looking at everything, and you find these people that are, I used to think 1.6 was really badass on ROA. And now you look at it and you're like, 4 is not unusual in some of these things. And you're talking about non-interest income that's off the charts, man, and things that just can't really be achieved in normal banking functions. And then you find out how it's done, and you're right. Sometimes it's not some vast array of, fintech. It's actually just following a little niche that got real successful. I think MBKC was a really good example of kind of starting that off on the VA loan side and different things like that. And you might even want to throw in there, Cross River with Rocket Mortgage. I think over time, there's going to be a lot more of those things that happen in banking, just kind of the evolution of it all, to where you have excellent opportunities to grow your balance sheet and grow your capital in a different kind of way, while still serving your community really well.
Well, to the
I
point,
think the idea of a tech bank is just kind of going to be a thing that at some point will maybe regulate it out of existence. I don't know.
there's some niches or even whole industries that are way behind and kind of untapped from the banking side. I mean, think about healthcare, right? When you talk about a mess and a maze, that there's tons of opportunity, which looks a lot like government. There's a whole nother area, right? I mean, tons of government things. And I mean, you talk about some budget, my goodness, right? And things that are bankable. And right, you look outside of that, there's tons of those things that are, like you said, Cross River goes after mortgage with Rocket Mortgage. There's a lot of things that are primed to be changed. And banking is kind of the last thing to change in those industries. The gig economy is another perfect example, right? I mean, Uber launched, what was that, a couple years ago, their debit card and checking account. And I mean, hey, right? I looked at the whole thing. Uber wasn't that damn smart. The damn banking side of Uber was brilliant. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you see that there's a lot of opportunities out there. It's cool.
Yeah, and where's it going, right? That was a plan that was set into place, way beforehand, right? So Yeah, to your earlier point, I mean, everybody wants to be in banking in some form or fashion, and that's kind of that's the
It's
Uber.
going to be cool again, right?
There
Yeah,
you go.
I think it is, man. It's kind of weird to say. I mean, as
Yeah,
a kid, I would have never told you that bankers were cool. Although, where I grew up, maybe they weren't cool, but they were respected. They were good
that's
people, and
right.
they did a lot for the community. So, that's probably
Exactly.
part of the kind of back to that conversation of pulling banking and ranching background and all that stuff together. It's a lot of that goes hand in hand.
I think we're
That's,
starting to see something too that's cool. Just on this whole technology side, there's a lot of cool new vendors and products, things that are actually a little smaller, a little more niche, little point solutions that are just really cool ideas that are coming out. But
yep.
I'm starting to see, I don't know if you guys are, but there's more, actually, your words, Brett, there's more respect, authenticity, integrity, right, amongst that crowd. And I mean, you see that. I mean, I see it a lot through bankers helping bankers. You probably see it a lot through IBAT and just how various groups want to be helpers to the community of community banking. And when I hadn't seen that, I mean, there was a decade or so there that was just like the desert of anything but just horrible bad things. You know what I mean? It was nasty contracts and everybody hates each other. And it was just a really abrasive relationship between the technology folks and the bankers. And at the same time, we had FinTech. Remember the challengers, right? You talk about it was like a tri-party abrasive, bleh. And now it feels like the bankers are banding together and a lot of the vendors and technology partners are coming back in and supporting community banks as a whole. It's a neat thing to see and one I'm personally a big fan of because do I need the best technology every time? I would take somebody that has mediocre stuff or a little better, above average. If they're really good people, they're really trustworthy. I know that they'll shoot me straight. I'll know that they'll do what they'll say they're going to do. So many times when you see the failure on the banking side, it's the overpromised and underdelivered problem. It's rarely didn't go big enough, fast enough, crazy enough, right? That's not where failure happens. It's deceit. So wonder what you're seeing there, man. Are you thinking the same way and feeling a little more hopeful?
Yeah, over the last 10 years, I would say that's definitely been a change for the positive. It seems that, whatever, I don't really refer to anybody as a vendor. We call everybody a partner. Otherwise, we don't need to be doing business with them, right? So, uh, but I'm seeing that with a lot of the core partners that are out there. And some of it's just cyclical. I think we're in a new cycle in the community banking space where we've kind of been through this. Everybody felt like they had to get as big as they could with as many locations as they could, and on and on and on. And that kind of led into, well, now we got to embrace this, early technology as much as we can and as fast as we can, and that resulted in a lot of strained relationships. And I think to the point that the banks were it was both sides. The banks were at fault for having unrealistic expectations, I think, in some situations, and then certainly as some partners got bigger or got sold or whatever, you kind of had the same consolidation disconnect between the two because of the consolidation of those entities and the consolidations of the banks. You just kind of the gap just widened and the communication got worse and worse. And so
Yeah.
I think that crashed down and then has been reborn into this relationship where it's more, hey, let's kind of right size up here. Uh, let's get with partners who understand where we're trying to go, and we're going to be willing to share the information they're going to need to help us get there, and do that in good faith. And it seems like there's a lot more of that, that kind of a mentality out there right
Man,
now than I've seen in my banking career. So
I'm with you. You guys are like a walking commercial for bankers helping bankers. I mean, that's exactly what this is trying to create a relationship where you've got somebody to help that's not got we don't have a dog in the fight. We're just trying to help, right? And then at the same time, when those things begin to go well, you're not at an adversarial relationship with your vendors. You're actually like, this is pretty cool. We're actually working together for a change. And to build that out, Tanner, you had a line there that just freaked me out. Kind of a community of helpers amongst banking. That is really what's happening here is you're starting to find, I tell people a lot of times it's like the salmon that made it up the stream. These are the elite salmon that are left. And when they kind of realize that, hey man, we can actually help each other And the vendors look around and go, there's not that many banks left. We better stop trying to be silly about this. And everybody starts trying to work towards a common goal. That's exactly where we've been trying to steer and make this thing work the right way. And I'm not trying to say it's, hey, it's our fault we're having great success. I think it's a matter of there was no other way to go.
Yeah, that brings back a memory. When we first met, and by the way, that was the day of the famous exploding stool, Dave. I'll never
right,
forget
man.
that as long as I live.
That's right. Yeah. If I hadn't been a great athlete, I could have been killed that day.
Yeah, I was like, man, I kind of like these guys. They're kind of crazy in a cool way, and I like, I like Western stuff, and they like Western stuff, and we're kind of just getting across the room from each other, and you kind of slide up on this stool, and this thing just goes kaboom. I mean, I have no idea. I felt like somebody set you up for some reason, but it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And the way that you just took it all in stride, man. You didn't worry about it, and you just went right on about what you're doing. We got you another stool, and I was thinking, man, this is pretty funny. But
yeah, that was like one of those embarrassing moments where you go to hop on the stool and the stool just exploded, and it's like, okay, we have another stool.
I don't think I'll ever see that again. I'll put it that way. It's pretty awesome.
If I'd been 10 pounds heavier, I'd have killed myself for sure.
But yeah, I think what you guys are talking about is, it's kind of something that was a concept back then. I mean, talking like that was ancient history, but it kind of was in the landscape of things that's happened since. But it was kind of about a room, right? Like, let's create a room where you get the bankers in there, and the bankers kind of tell everybody what they need to be tech forward and figure out how to continue to grow and be relevant and compete. And then you've got some capital guys in the room, or some advisors that understand, like, how do we need to put this vehicle together, and then you've got everybody else in there. You've got some regulatory knowledge sprinkled in there. You've got some other whatever else you need kind of in that room, and you're just kind of getting the right people in there having the right conversation, and that's how this future of community banking is going to look. And so that was kind of the formative days of some of that thinking. Just get in the room.
Exactly where that's it.
The regulators, everybody else in the room.
That's cool, man. Because I mean, you were there for the birth of all of that thought process. That, I mean, it's like a new renaissance of thinking and banking. And I mean, you were right at the ground floor of all of that. That just a bunch of people getting together, going, I think we can do better, And how do we go about that? And it's just stuff that, like the roundup. I mean, it's like, what do you do? I'm like, I get the hell out of the way, man, and let these people do what they do. I'm going to be hitting you up pretty soon, and some of your friends on some other, you were talking a minute ago about the evolution of the technology and stuff. There's opportunities out there now that have come to us that we're trying to share with the banking community in different ones. Whether it's government opportunities or other things, that it's surprising how big and vast everything has become so fast because of the extension of banking services. I guess it'd probably be the way to do that, whether it be, payments or whatever. And it's just opened everything up. Government budgets are now actually something that a bank can really benefit from. And there's just new opportunities, like Tanner mentioned, healthcare. I mean, there's verticals everywhere that open up doors that really just weren't there. I don't know. I couldn't put my finger on exactly when that moment was, but the fact that all the people were together talking about it, we were able to capture that moment and create a momentum for that to everybody. And I think Tanner nailed it too, with trust. Man, it's just, my God, if people would just tell the truth and trust each other a little bit, and you start finding out who can't handle that pretty quickly. Right. And then you find out the people you can trust, and they band together and they start building together. And that's pretty neat.
Yeah, you dangle a few opportunities out there and see who screws you, and you figure out who the good guys are pretty quick. That's fun life. Brett, I want to give you, well, first, thanks a ton, but I want to give you a couple minutes, man. Anything you want for final thoughts, anything that's on your mind. It could be banking, whatever you want. Just a couple of minutes, your final thoughts. Where's your head at for the future, and what are you thinking about? And
yeah,
putting you on the spot.
Yeah, here I've got my Topo Chico here, so this is kind of a staple for me around here. They say that you shouldn't drink too much of that stuff. But
You put a
I
little
can't-
tequila and lime in there, and you got a ranch water.
yeah, I mean, you got to have the first ingredient to the ranch water. So we'll push all the rest of that into the weekend. Yeah, it's an exciting time in community banking, and we're in Texas, of course, and I'm sure there will be others that see this that are outside of our state, but we're in a good environment. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on that are always concerning and could be a threat, but there's more opportunity than there is negativity out there right now, and it's just about just like I said earlier, just taking that next step when you're doing something like we're doing. Just do it right, take the time, build the back office out first, get the pieces in place that you need to move forward, and all the while just kind of balancing all the other aspects of your capital and investors and employees and everybody that's a stakeholder, customers, community, all the stakeholders, just balancing all that out and doing it right. And they start to recognize it pretty quickly. And I think it creates a level of patience and understanding that we're doing something organic here. And when you're talking about integrating technology or moving forward an innovation plan, that would tend to sound inorganic to some. But I think the opposite, that's what's so cool about this time. I think the opposite is really kind of true. It's making these plans a little more organic and a little bit more viable and a little bit more long-term to have those opportunities. And then it's just a matter of, figuring out how to figure out what you want to do with whom, as we said earlier, who you pick your partners correctly, and just be patient, do it right and be patient. That's kind of I think that's the huge opportunity in a nutshell, in community banking right now. And I think there's a lot of good folks out there doing a lot of good things. And I think the numbers on balance, to our nerdiness, Dave, on call reports, I mean, you can see it. I mean, there's a lot of banks that are getting it, and in different states and in places where you might not think that there's as much opportunity. We're seeing these, kind of tech forward, but not tipping over forward organizations, really being able to leverage that relationship first, tech forward kind of a mentality, and bigger, multi-billion-dollar banks and $100 million banks and everything in between. It seems like the next 10 years is going to be a good time, a good cycle.
Man, can I pay you a compliment real quick? I got to tell you.
Man, be careful.
If you be careful. If you'd have just recorded that right there until you said the bank part and said, let me play this back. Who's he talking about? I'll bet you 9 out of 10 people, but 9 out of 10 people would have said, well, he's talking about his business. You sounded like a businessman, not a banker. And I think that may be the answer to all of this, is to operate more like a businessman.
I thought
you care about your people, you care about the technology, how you build out slowly, how you protect everything around you. That sounds like a businessman.
Hey, you nailed it. I will say. I mean, I was a little worried about what you were going to say there, but yeah, that's exactly how we view it. I mean, and another thing I didn't say earlier is, this industry has and I don't want to make any of my friends mad by saying this, but this industry has a little bit of a reputation of being a little ego heavy from time to time. When you got somebody running the bank, this is so and so's bank, or these guys are doing this, and they're the best. And I think there's a lot of ego being pressed out of community banking right now too, and with this recognition that if you can push a lot of ego out of it, there's a lot of value sitting there on the table that benefits everybody, right? So yeah, that's flattering to me, honestly. I mean, we want to be good business people first, and that aligns with our customer base. I mean, that's what most of our customers are. And in community banking, they're business people. So that's the best thing you could say back my direction.
That's great. Well, hey man, let's get together soon, do some fishing or hunting or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Problem with me right now is I just haven't been able to. It's just the truth. We're grinding. We're in the weeds, and we need to be. And there'll be a time for that. So hold that thought.
Understand it well, man. You guys keep it up. Super proud of you. Super thankful for coming on and also just sharing the story, man, being helpful to the community of community banking. I think you're one of the pros at that. So thank you and keep at it, man. Let us know what you need.
Yeah,
Yes.
same here. Same here. Appreciate you guys. This is important what you're doing, and we're in your corner.
I appreciate you. We'll see you next time, buddy.